thanks so much for checking out Tina Butty on YouTube. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. Hello, and welcome back to Tina Butty Podcast. I am Erica.
And I am Dominic.
And today's podcast is coming to you a little bit later than we normally try to get these out a little bit earlier, but Dominic and I have both been sick, so.
Yeah, and we still are recovering, so that's why, my voice sounds a bit weird.
Yeah, I was going to say, in honor of the 25th anniversary of Friends, we've both got Phoebe's sexy phlegm going.
Thank you, my babies.
But anyway, today's episode is all about canals in Britain.
Yes.
Yeah.
Canals.
We kind of touched on the topic in a previous podcast.
How to get around Britain.
A couple of podcasts ago, when we were talking about different ways of traveling around Britain. And we mentioned that we were going to do a separate podcast just on canals because the canal system in Britain is really interesting. And Dominic and I, especially since we've been sick the last few days, we've really been getting into canals. Like we're watching this YouTube channel called...
YouTube vlogger.
Yeah, a vlog, a canal boat vlog. Called Cruising the Cut.
Cruising the Cut, yeah. David Johns, a former broadcast journalist for ITV. He gave up his job and sold his house and went to live on a narrowboat and now he's cruising the Cut, which is cruising the canals.
Yeah, and so he vlogs...
Of England and Wales.
He just vlogs his life living on this narrowboat. And the narrowboats are what the type of boat... that is made specifically for canals, I think. I mean, they're very narrow in width, and they're super, super long, and you drive them from the back of the boat, don't you?
Well, you steer them, yeah.
Yeah.
Usually it is. Sometimes I think modern ones will have like a wheelhouse in the middle of it, but usually they're steered by a tiller at the back.
Yeah.
And they go, forwards and backwards, and that's about really it. And they're very long, these narrowboats anyway. Sometimes you can have a cabin cruiser, which is kind of like a smaller version of a yacht. And it only has like a bedroom and maybe a kitchenette.
Yeah.
And you can drive them like a boat,
But people live on these narrowboats. I mean, they have bathrooms. They have a little bedroom. They have a little living area, and a kitchen.
Have a stove and a coal fire. They're like tiny houses, really.
Yeah. So we're just getting super into that. Before we start talking about canals specifically, though, I mean, we may mention a bit more about the narrowboats, but we just want to do a little disclaimer here that Dominic and I are not experts on this subject whatsoever.
We're totally experts on canals.
Neither of us have ever been
cruising the Cut for centuries.
Neither of us have ever been on a narrowboat, and I've never even seen the canals in person that I can think of.
What? Never seen the canals?
I don't think so. Maybe in Liverpool?
There's canals dotted around, maybe, yeah.
Maybe when I was in Liverpool, I possibly saw a canal. I don't remember those. So
canals as a kid and narrowboats and stuff, There's actually one of the more famous ones, actually, as a kid, was a show called Rosie and Jim, and the presenter John Cunliffe owned a narrowboat. And that was the whole thing. He would cruise up and down the canal on a narrowboat, and he'd write stories. And he'd like to pretend that his two rag dolls, Rosie and Jim, came to life, but they really did, when he was off the boat, and they'd get into all sorts of adventures and stuff.
So sort of like Raggedy Ann or something.
Yeah,
like
that's the sort of thing. Yeah, and that for me was like fascinating, Yeah. So that's the most famous iteration, I think, of a canal boat. Or a narrowboat in British. It's
funny that you mentioned that because I think you've shown me that before on YouTube or something, maybe.
Rosie and Jim, yeah, it's a kid show, childhood show from the 90s. So
yeah, but I was just thinking earlier that Dominic and I like this show called Detectorists. I don't know how many of our listeners have ever seen it, but it's a very specific hobby-based show surrounding these two guys who happen to love metal detecting.
And they've got their own metal detecting club. The two main characters are played by Toby Jones and Mackenzie Crook. Toby Jones you might know from the Marvel films. I think he plays a bad guy in them, and he's been in other things. He's been in a load of stuff. Mackenzie Crook from The Office and Pirates of the Caribbean.
Yeah, he was the guy that was missing, who was always losing his eyeball in Pirates of the Caribbean.
Mackenzie Crook actually wrote the show, I think, Detectorists. So, and he starred in it, and it was on the BBC. I think it's available on Acorn TV.
Okay, yeah. So. Yeah, we just saw that.
So if you haven't seen it, go watch it. It's very, very British, very...
Super British.
Very kind of like, that's what people do in Britain. That's people like that if you're from England.
But I was just thinking that it would be really great to see a similar type show, but surrounding boaters. Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean...
So David Johns, if you're listening... We know you can write because we've heard your scripts that you read out narrating the scenes in your vlogs. Get on it.
Yeah. A drama or a sitcom.
Like a dramedy, let's say.
Yeah.
A dramedy. Yeah, it would be great.
Concerning the narrowboat community and the canals.
All the stops.
And the high seas of the canals of England and Wales.
I think it would be so British and so brilliant. Like all the stops that you have along the way.
Navigating those locks.
Those
Gongoozlers, which we'll come to later on.
Stopping at the pub, stopping, to do your wash or to empty your toilet, to fill your water, all of that kind of stuff. It would be a great show.
It would be a great show. Maybe we should write it.
Well, we've got to have some experience, I think. We'll have to watch some more of Cruising the Cut episodes before we have enough material to base a show on, but
well, you heard it here first anyway.
Yes. So if you see a show out there, if a show appears suddenly, you heard it here first. Okay, so let's get on this before we run out of time. We're waffling. We're rambling.
We're just doing canal time at the moment, as it's called.
So give us a little bit of history, especially for our American listeners. What are the canals even?
Well, canals basically are man-made waterways, and they can vary in depth, but usually in Britain, they're usually only about 5 feet in depth. So they're not that deep.
Right.
I mean, you could fall in if you're 6 foot, you'd be okay, It's like if you're 5 foot, you might have to swim a bit.
Because I think in America, when we hear canals, we automatically think of Venice.
Oh, Venice. Yeah. Venice is, oh, yes. If there's a lot of canals, it's like the Venice of whatever,
Right. But the canals in Britain are much more narrow than most of the canals in Venice, I think.
Yes, I think so, yeah. And a lot of them, usually what they are, the Romans built them, funnily enough, so the Romans knew what they were doing. They were from Italy,
Right.
And it was largely used for like irrigation and to link rivers to each other. So, you might have for traveling, Right. And so, they had them in Britain since then, but they only really started to be like popular during the Industrial Revolution, and that's when the modern canal network in Britain is now known because of that. They built the Grand Union and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
Which is like London to Birmingham, Birmingham to Manchester, all those kind of things.
Yeah, I was going to say, if for our American listeners, and this is going to be me referencing Peaky Blinders again because I'm obsessed, obviously.
Those two series of Peaky Blinders, they feature the canal
quite a bit
in Birmingham, yeah.
Yeah, so if you've seen Peaky Blinders, you know the type of canals that we're talking about here. Although there are a lot of they're mostly rural canals, though.
They're mostly rural, and they were a cheap, well, in those days anyway, an economic way to transport goods, to like the big cities, like from like big industrial centers like Birmingham would be able to get their stuff down to London quite easily
because they didn't really have They didn't really have highways, did they?
Not
back
really,
then?
no. And horse-drawn carriages. It was like, it was quicker. It was quicker in those days. If you think about it,
it would have been a lot easier on the horse too.
Because back in those days, there was no like steam-powered engines to drive the barge boats or the narrowboats and everything. So they have to have horses on the towpath, and so the horse would be pulling it along, and it'd have to go through the locks and everything. And the old bridges are still there with the like swing bridges with like the gap in the middle for where the tow rope could go through for the horse and everything. And it was just they were just pulling along with a guy at the tiller, just steering it.
Right.
And I don't know how fast they would have been going. May have been going like 3 miles an hour, and they still do that now. I mean, no horses run it anymore. There's still the towpaths, but no animals are harmed. While it's all engines and motorized now with like diesel engines and stuff like that.
No need for workhorses.
And it's all pleasure cruising now. Yeah, I mean it dates back to Rome and Britain. So and it grew rapidly from then on. So, like, parts of North England, and there's canals in Scotland, but they're not really, accessible from the canals in England and Wales.
Yeah.
And,
as you said, the canals connect to the rivers, so...
Connect to the river, and you can go on the river in a canal boat, like a narrowboat.
Right.
But really, you only see cabin cruisers on the rivers. You have to get a river license, I think. I'm not too sure about that, from the Canal and River Trust to go on a river, because it's much deeper and it's, there's a bit of a tide.
Right.
So it's a little bit shaky on a flat-bottomed narrowboat.
Right.
But yeah, the canals, after road haulage came along, they were pretty much gone, and by the mid-1960s, they were all either abandoned, disused, or closed by British Waterways, which was the government-owned, because they were nationalised in the 40s. And then it was just up to people who were, like, in the 60s, it grew to, like, a pleasure cruising type thing, It was like everybody was, like, on their, like, holiday on a canal boat, Right. It's kind of a fun idea, just go up and down. And so the volunteers were the ones who started, like, restoring the canals and all that. And by the 1990s, I think that's all they were doing then. I don't think there's I don't know if there's any commercial use on the canals this day. Maybe there is. Maybe there's still some goods being brought down by canal, maybe on the bigger ones, maybe on the Grand Union, perhaps. But it's really not relied on like it was in the Industrial Revolution,
Well, they have little boats that sell things, don't they? So you could consider them to be commercial, I suppose.
Yeah, you could consider them to be commercial, I suppose, but not like they're not like hauling stuff. You'll pull up against a narrowboat that sells ice creams or hot dogs or sausage rolls or supplies for your boat even, yeah. So that's a godsend to boaters, I'm sure.
Did you say hot dogs?
Hot dogs, yeah, or whatever, like...
Is anybody really selling hot dogs from a narrowboat in the canals in Britain?
Maybe they are. They might be selling hamburgers too. You never know. And fish and chips.
Fish and chips. They're doing fish and chips.
Not from the fish in the canal, though, sure, because I don't think you can actually eat the fish in the canal.
Deep, though, are they? The canal?
No, they're only about 5 feet deep at the most.
So
you can jump in without fear of drowning unless you're a small child.
Right.
But yeah, the best thing about the canals is their engineering, because there's a system, how, a canal is like man-made, so how does it get uphill, or how does it get downhill?
Right.
Without, like being a water slide or something for the boats. Right. So there's this system called a lock, which is L-O-C-K, not L-O-C-H, like Loch Ness.
Right.
It's a device used for raising and lowering boats between stretches of water of different levels, and they're on the river too. And it's this fixed chamber where the lock is filled with water from upstream, or it's drained downstream. You go in, right? The gates are open, the boat enters the lock, and then the lock is filled with water or drained with water, depending on which way you're going. Filled with water if you're going upstream, or drained if you're going downstream. Right. And if you're filled with water, and you have to it's kind of a complex thing. If you're doing it solo, like Cruising the Cut does, it's kind of annoying, especially if you've got a series of them. You've got to moor up, you've got to get up, and you've got to get out, you've got to open the gate, you've got to open the paddles and do everything, and
open the front gate, get back on the
boat, steer your boat in. So it's handy with a crew, and a crew could just be one other person, really, just going up and down the towpath. Right. Setting the locks your way and opening the gates and everything, so you don't have to get off. Right. And usually there's Gongoozlers around.
What in the world is a Gongoozler?
Well, a Gongoozler, Erica, is someone who likes to look at people on the canal.
So basically like a train spotter or a plane spotter.
Basically, but I think Gongoozlers aren't that fastidious of, like, you know, writing down exactly which narrowboat came through, you know, and how many narrowboats they've seen, or how many GRP boats they've seen, or CRT boats, or whatever.
They just like to watch it for, like, relaxation or something, probably.
Yeah, I mean, you know, and sometimes, you know, as he says in Cruising the Cut, when he's doing the locks and you've got Gongoozlers there, they might kind of heckle you or something, you know, they might... just put you off your stride.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of it's a complex procedure. You have to, like, really get the windlass and do it, and, you know, open the gate, and you might do something wrong, or you might bang the boat in the thing, and they'll be like, "Oh, you banged the boat." Oh, yeah. And, you know, it just, you're self-conscious about it, you know. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of like, it's an odd kind of pastime, I suppose, to be a Gongoozler, because they don't actively participate. They don't actively go on the boats. Yeah. They just like to look. Right. And I think it's like a Lincolnshire term. It's, you know, gone and goose or something, you know, some kind of like Lincolnshire dialect or something came from gongoozling, you know.
Whatever gongoozling is. That old Lincolnshire term, gongoozling.
Yeah, I mean, I just kind of like briefly read up on it.
As we said, we are not experts. If you're listening and you already know things about the canals and you can hear that we're getting everything wrong, feel free to let us know, because, I mean, this is just something we've become interested in. We would really enjoy, I think, going back to Britain.
Of selling our house and getting a narrowboat and just cruising England on the narrowboats.
I think it would be really interesting to do. They have hotel boats, and they have boats you can rent out yourself.
Hire boat companies, they're quite expensive.
Apparently.
Yeah, there was something like £1,000 a week or something for a hire boat, which is really expensive.
I guess if you're thinking it's your accommodation, you know, if you went and stayed in a hotel, you could get a hotel for like $100 a night. If you're staying there for 7 nights, that's $700. So it's not, you know, plus you're having your travel is included.
Your travel is included, and your diesel.
And you have facilities for making meals, you know. So, I mean, I guess it's not so much. It seems a lot to us because, you know, we're broke. So
kind of broke, you know. But yeah, I mean, usually like a canal boat trip, like maybe at one of the canals, if you're going quite, like, say you're doing the Grand Union from London to Birmingham, you're going to moor up every so often in some, you know, some place, you know.
Well, yeah,
usually the moorings are only like, I think the CRT moorings are usually like 48 hours.
Okay, maybe we should go really basic for people who don't even know what mooring means.
It's tying up your ship on the bank.
Right.
And for like how long you're going to stay there, and you can just, and usually you'd stay somewhere where you've got enough supplies. You can get to a water point, or you can get to an electric point or something. Usually people moor up in a marina for that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. But sometimes you can just moor up on the bank outside of a town or in the middle of nowhere, as you say, and it's like a 14-day mooring before the CRT
and it
moving.
doesn't cost.
It doesn't cost, no.
Yeah.
Some moorings are 48 hours only by the Canal and River Trust. Charitable trust.
And some charge...
there's some charge overnight, some charge a tenner or $5 for a night, and there's like pub moorings, which you have to buy a drink if you moor there.
Right.
Spend a certain amount of money there. Yeah. But yeah, that's because sometimes you can't moor some places. Sometimes it'll just be like, there'll be nothing to hold on to,
Right.
the boat. And yeah, that's...
Because you think about it, it's like, let's say you're going London to Liverpool on the train or driving or whatever. It's about 4 hours, right?
The canals follow like the train lines, because the train lines were built close to the canals, or sort of following that path through the thing, So sometimes, you'll get like, you're mooring up near a train line, and it's the railway line, and you can hear the trains going past it, like, waking you up every so often, right.
So driving or on the train or whatever, it would take you London to Liverpool, let's say 4 hours.
4 hours.
Right.
I'm not
around there.
It would probably take you going
give or take. But on a canal, you're going literally 3 miles per hour.
There's a speed limit, and I think it's about 4 miles an hour, and usually canal boats do 2 to 3.
Right.
It's a very slow pace of life.
Right.
It's perfect for people who want to sit back, take it easy, enjoy the scenery, and just do things at their own pace.
Because these boats, they don't even leave a wake, do they?
No, they don't, They shouldn't anyway, unless you've got some sort of crazy engine on them that you can power through.
So London to Liverpool on the canals would probably take a couple of days at least?
Couple of days, depending on how long you were going to stop somewhere.
Because you're out... Oh, another thing we didn't mention is on these canal boats, you're I say driving, you say steering.
Yeah, well, steering.
You're driving.
Piloting them.
The boat from outside. You're standing outside at the back end of the boat. You're just standing there the whole time. So you ideally want to have decent weather. If it starts raining or something like that, if it's not too cold, you might be willing to stand outside in the rain if you have a rain jacket or someone to stand next to you with an umbrella or something.
I mean, you could even have like a cover. You could even like get a cover for yourself, I guess, but really, and people aren't going to do that generally. People like to cover the front end of the bow of their boat and stuff like that, where the crew sits and watches as you're going along.
Yeah.
And, they can tell you, because, those things are long, you can't see, you have to kind of like, when you're taking a bend and stuff, you have to kind of blow the horn to see if someone else is coming, and there's a lot of traffic, and sometimes...
And the back of the boat sits a little bit deeper in the water than the front of the boat. A
little bit,
so
yes.
You've got the I don't know if this is correct terminology, but you've got the nose of the boat.
The bow.
The bow, okay. up, raised up a bit when you're... I mean, that's true with pretty much any boat, actually.
They're flat-bottomed as well, so if and you can get stuck in a shallow area and have to be able to push off.
Yeah.
Because sometimes the canals can be like 2 feet deep. Or there's like a shoaly bank or a sill or whatever, as you're going to moor up, and you could get stuck on that, and you have to push off. But, it's very pleasurable and nice for people who like to take it easy, who just want a gentle pace of life, going through the countryside, listening to the birds, watching the wildlife, watching the little ducks with their ducklings, the swans with their swanlings, and... goose with their goslings and all that kind of stuff.
I mean, I think it would be, to me, it looks like it would be fun to do the locks and everything at first, and then you'd you'd become a bit irritated, like, oh god, not
on your
another
own,
lock.
on your own, definitely, yes. I think if you were doing it solo, like
Yeah.
Cruising the Cat does, it would probably become very irritating after a while, and just like, I'm tired, I just want to moor up. But, you know, you can moor, like, say like the staircase locks, I'm sure are kind of annoying if you're doing them on your own, but usually you'll have someone, you know, on the canal, like a lock keeper. You usually get a lock keeper who are volunteers, by the way. They don't get paid. They just want to do it out of their own initiative, you know.
Yeah.
And you don't tip.
Which is a bit foreign to us Americans.
I mean, it's just kind of like people who volunteer to look after a National Trust home. I don't think they get paid. I think they just get paid. They just get the room and board or whatever there.
Yeah.
They might get paid. I'm not actually sure about that, but there's people who volunteer to do stuff.
If they're having to give a tour, I would assume they're getting paid.
Maybe, yeah. I mean, I don't know, but the volunteer Lockies, as they call them, they're not getting paid. You know,
Yeah.
they're just doing it of their own, out of the goodness of their hearts.
One of the more interesting things I think about the canals is that, well, besides the lock systems, because the lock system is just completely ingenious, the way they've figured out how to get you up and down these British hillsides.
Aqueducts as well.
Oh,
you
that's
know.
what I was gonna say. The next craziest thing is the fact that you can be basically up in the air. You know, there's
Going over a main road, or you know, just because, and it's mainly for the passage of water to get to somewhere else. You know, they're taking water from a reservoir or wherever, another river, and just transporting it over a hill or over a recess to, you know, another place. And of course that's a canal now, you know, because they use all that, you know. But the locks, you know, they are ingenious, you know.
Yeah, the aqueduct, if you watch footage of these canals of people going across the aqueducts, it basically reminds me of like the log ride at a water park. You know, it looks like, okay, you're going along, and then all of a sudden you're just gonna
You're expecting that
drop.
big drop, yeah, but it doesn't. You just come to another lock and you just get in
gently lower
gently, like staircase.
Right.
Sometimes, you know, if it's like a massive mountain or a hill or something, or a very big elevation, you'll have a staircase lock,
Right.
which will be one lock after the other, or sometimes, you know, whatever. So you just be going up like stairs, you know, very gently. Or sometimes they have boat lifts as well,
Oh yeah.
which
It's like an elevator.
it's like a big tub elevator, you know, filled with water, and just lowers you down or takes you back up, you know.
Yeah.
You
crazy British people.
It's actually I think it was the Romans who invented it. So
Crazy Romans.
what have the Romans done for us, eh? But yeah, I mean, that's how it is. I mean, over here in Texas, I mean, they could cut canals, but oh, maybe not. I don't know.
I think they'd probably I feel like they'd dry up in Texas.
Yeah.
You'd have to constantly be running to them and running water to them. I mean,
Yeah,
and
'cause, I mean, yeah, that's true. I mean, it's how, you know, there's a lot of people who ask how does the canal keep being refilled, but I think it's rivers and reservoirs. They build reservoirs just for the canals sometimes, you know. Rain, you know, everything. We get a lot of rain in Britain, so it's just kind of like that kind of thing.
I think, yeah, I mean, if the water levels are getting too low, I'm sure they just open up a lock and just let water in from another area.
Yeah, or open up a dam or whatever, yeah. Yeah, that's what they'll do. I mean, I'm no expert on it, but I'm sure someone will inform us.
I think that's about it. I mean, was it?
That's about it. That's pretty much it, I think. I mean, you know, if you have any questions,
Don't ask us because we don't know.
or if you have any questions about what we talked about, or if this interests you, you know, you should check out Cruising the Cut's vlogs.
Yeah.
And there's other ones on there too. I mean, he's
the only one we've seen, but
yeah, he's very informative,
but we like it.
yeah, we love it.
Yeah, and we definitely
We definitely do want to cruise the cut. You know, we've been thinking about doing that. That's a nice little thing to do if we ever go back to England. I've always thought about it too. It's always been kind of in the back of my mind anyway.
Yeah, well, we watched some program on the BBC years ago about it. I can't remember what it was, but that was the first time I had ever seen anything about it, and it's interested me ever since then. We've only just recently become more interested, but yeah, it definitely seems like a very cool way if you're very laid back. Now if you're like an adrenaline junkie, this is probably not
fast? No, you don't want to go on the canal.
This is not the life for you. Okay,
it's not the life. No.
But if you're laid back, if you like peaceful living, easy, quiet countryside, for me, I think going through the cities and stuff would be interesting too, to me. Going into Birmingham and
you're seeing them from a different perspective.
Peaky Blinders,
Yes. I mean, that's one of the things. You go into these towns and, you can sympathize with, like, David of Cruising the Cut and all that, there's towns usually mean bored kids, so there's a lot of vandalism. And, other boaters are like, oh, don't go to Nuneaton. Yeah. Because, there's so many youths there that, mess with you in the night. Smash your boat up, graffiti, whatever, Yeah. So what usually they like to do is moor outside the town and then come back in that way or whatever, But yeah, you can moor anywhere, and usually there's like a supermarket or, a pub. Usually the pubs are the most important thing on the canal network, if the Swan is usually what they're called.
Grocery stores too. I would assume you would want to.
No, I think pubs are just...
Fine.
Pubs are more important than grocery stores. We can do without them.
I wonder if there's police boats who, pull you over for driving your canal boat drunk.
The CRT are the police of the canals, I think. Canal and River Trust.
I wonder what kind of trouble you get into if you've had one too many at the pub and you steering your canal boat,
Well, going about 2 or 3 miles an hour, you're not going to do too much damage, I don't think, but,
You can...
You might get a few angry swans who are just like, you're drunk, go home, moor up.
Can you kayak and canoe down the canals also?
Yeah, you can do that, I'm sure. I don't know if you need a special license or anything like that, but yeah, you can do that. You can't take a speedboat or anything on it, but, you can... kayak and canoe.
Yeah.
Canoe or kayak, whichever one you want to do. And row. I think there's rowing you can do. But mainly they stick to the rivers, I think.
Yeah.
Because it's more of like a current.
Well, I think we've relaxed ourselves so much that we're gonna end it here. We're already late, so we need to wrap this up and get it out to you all. Really quickly though, before we end, I do want to say that we're going to have a giveaway coming up, and
it's a giveaway.
I think next week we're going to try to get it ready to start it up next week. We'll run it for about a month, I'm thinking.
About a month, yeah.
Yeah. We've been stopping at all the little British sections, at all the grocery stores and import stores around here. We've even driven up to Dallas, and we've made a little collection of things that we think British expats and or Anglophiles or whoever might want. And
even if you're not, we'll make you one.
And we'll have information about that coming out next week, I think. So just be looking out for that.
Look out for it. Yeah, it's going to be a good giveaway with lots of goodies.
And be sure you're following us on all the social medias.
All the social medias, Butty.
Yeah, so that you can get notified when that does happen, so you can enter to win it. Also check out our Patreon page and Coffee. Like us, share us, follow us, do all the things.
And we'll
talk to you next time.
Cheerio.
Bye.